Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good evening, excuse me. There we go. When we started this, we said we need 100 butts for 100 chairs. We didn't expect that we would be pulling out chairs, so I thank you all for being here this evening. And let's get started. We would like to begin with gratitude, of course, for everyone involved in this project. We would like to thank Ms. Nellie Ashford and Ms. Ebony Hill for sharing your story with us this evening. We would like to thank Hugh House for their world-building skill sets. Joshan in the back right there, looking fresh. We would like to thank the Stories Yet to Be Told initiative at Davidson College and the Baca Visiting Artists and Scholar Program. And we would like to thank you all for being here this evening. With your babies and with your families, everyone's looking great. So where do we begin? In 2017, Davidson College joined a coalition of universities studying slavery after forming a commission on race and slavery comprised of students, faculty, staff, trustees, and alumni. Over the span of 20 months and 9 gatherings, the commission sought to build, quote, an understanding of the college's history which is intertwined with the legacies of slavery and the lives of enslaved persons. They released a report of their findings that included a timeline of established historical facts about the college. Facts about land, money, bodies that ushered our college into its infancy. Facts about the euphemisms used and the evidence removed from the records concerning the lives and legacies of those enslaved. For example, we know enslaved people made the first 250,000 bricks that built the first 7 buildings on our campus, but we don't know their names, and we may never, but the legacy of their labor exists all around us, every day. The report also clearly states there is much continuing work to be done. Our intent is not to be comprehensive in these few pages. Eventually, the commission would end and produce 3 committees, one for broadly forming new projects, one for changing our naming practices, and one for commemoration. Recently, on April 13th, 2022, the trustees approved a naming and acknowledgement policy which will influence the decisions of who appears on the names of our buildings, our portraits, and other parts of our physical campus landscape. The Special Committee on Commemoration also recently announced on January 7th, 2022, the beginning of a memorial to recognize the atrocities, injustices, omissions, and blind spots of the past, while also imagining a new future, one built on perseverance, triumph, and the valuable contributions of those being commemorated. And they have a $4 million budget, but we can talk about that later. Each special committee upholds the college's responsibility to address our history with bravery and honesty. We have an opportunity tonight. We have an opportunity to confront history once again. We have an opportunity to connect to a family and their living legacy. I will share a bit of the story now. In 2017, Dr. Joseph Ewoodzie taught a course named The Sociology of Beatties Ford Road in collaboration with Johnson C. Smith University and Davidson College. In the course, one of the groups uncovered a remarkable truth. One of the students, Miss Ebony Hill, is the great-great-granddaughter of a man named Robert, formerly enslaved by David Alexander Caldwell, one of the original trustees of Davidson College, and owner of the Glenwood plantation properties around Davidson. David Alexander Caldwell is also the great-grandson of Major John Davidson, one of the Davidson families to have immigrated from Scotland in the 1700s. Davidson College does not get its name from Major John Davidson. Davidson College gets its name from William Lee Davidson, a different branch of the Davidson name. Records show that these two families did exchange marriage, property, and bodies in the beginning of the middle 1700s. Tonight, we are focusing solely on the descendants of Major John Davidson, specifically his great-grandson, David Alexander Caldwell, an original trustee of the college who would enslave an ancestor of Miss Ashford. Here we can point to the college's complicity by way of one of its trustees and begin a conversation about accountability. This is the history that has opened space for the stories of Miss Ashford and her family to challenge our college community. They will expand more on their story later in the evening. I will end with a story about one of my first conversations with Miss Nellie Ashford, the mother of Miss Ebony Hill. I asked something along the lines of, "What do you hope to accomplish from this project?" Amidst other responses, she said, "I want to be remembered like the living body of Emmett Till, the one still breathing, the one still bustling down the Mississippi roads." Over the phone, the static crackled. "As long as there are bricks, we should know the battles beneath them. My story should never die." I hope we, the people and policies of Davidson College, do not fail this family. Tonight will be the first step. And now I will give the stage to someone who will share more about Miss Nellie Ashford. And thank you all for being here this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Markia Humphreys, and I'm a senior here at Davidson, a studio art major. In my first experience with Miss Ashford, she wasn't expecting to have passengers. She arrived in her blue SUV, and Maurice and I squeezed into the back of her car. We explained to her that we Ubered into Charlotte because circumstances left us both without functioning cars. She scolded us for not telling her ahead of time and began to list a series of ways she would have helped, one of which was offering her own car. I think she would have given us each a car if she could have, or driven the whole 40-minute round trip just to meet with us. Even in that brief interaction, her compassion shined through. That day we first met her, we went to her studio. There were stacks upon stacks of artwork in there. Mostly of her own, some of other artworks or of other artists she's collected over time, and some other items that were dear to her. She asked us, what all do we want to see? And we replied, everything. We knew we couldn't see everything in one trip, but it was interesting to see which pieces she chose to represent her art. She began to show us several pieces, passing them to us one by one. There was one piece we had to lug out. It was large, nearly 4 feet wide, and depicted children running and biking across a field. As we pulled it into the hallway, Miss Ashford explained explained the daily walks to school. Each day, the Black students would have to walk together, always together, because that was the safest. She explained how there were times where the houses they walked by would taunt them. The people inside those homes would do things like throw rocks or shout names. There are even times where white families released dogs to chase the children. She pointed to the dog in the image, tongue out, playing with the children, and said, I decided to place it in front of the kids to show a happier version of what happened. Many of Miss Ashford's pieces are directly connected to her memories growing up in the Jim Crow South, serving as snapshots of her experiences, but also a reclaiming and reimagining of those histories. You see, Miss Ashford is a folk artist. Self-taught, she began making art in 1998. With collage as her medium, she weaves together different textures, patterns, and fabrics alongside paints, photographs, and writing to tell her stories. She had us gently run our hands across the bottom of the piece as she explained how she used actual sand to create the textures in the ground. I felt excited. In most museums, you're not supposed to touch the art. It's supposed to be a visual experience. Her style of creating is a reflection of herself. Moments rarely went by when she didn't begin to tell a story about how things were, about where she used to be, who used to be there, and who is there now. She has a powerful ability to paint pictures both with her hands and with her words. As a visual artist myself, I don't usually rely on words, which is ironic because I'm up here right now. But you miss out on an essential part of the art if you don't hear the story. Miss Ashford's work contains lives that cannot be fully captured in a single image. Her work provides a window, but it's her words, her stories, that bring these pieces to life. In an interview, she says, "My stories come from my hands. There are so many stories inside. I could paint a lifetime and never finish the stories." Stories of her mother standing for the whole train ride as she sat nearby on a suitcase for hours and hours. Stories of community members with stooped backs working on the farms near her childhood home. I could go on and on about singular stories that stand out to me. The stories of her life, her family, of her community. I have experienced her memory in different ways too. We've taken several trips into Charlotte together, from shopping at Goodwill to viewing installations at the recent Charlotte Shout Festival. Each time, she would give me turn-by-turn directions. I've learned there's no point in setting up the GPS because she already knows how to get there and knows it better than any digital device could ever tell me. But I think that's a big takeaway too. I can read secondhand accounts of these experiences and these histories, about what it's like to be a practicing artist, about what it's like to be a Black woman or resident in Charlotte. But the textures or wisdom gathered over a lifetime, like knowing the back road or the winding path that leads to a safer destination, the beautiful nuances I learned while building a relationship with Miss Ashford. A person eager to pass on the stories with a delicate touch to the next generation. In conversation with her, I feel like I've become a better artist, a better listener, and while standing up here on stage, a better storyteller. And I will end with a final story. Miss Ashford invited me to go to a private pre-showing and silent auction for the Black Fine Arts Fair of Charlotte. I arrived at her house in what I wore to class that day, an oversized sweater and some baggy ripped jeans. Now, I'd never been to a silent auction before, but when Miss Ashford turned her head, looked me up and down, I knew, even without a word, that wasn't gonna cut it. So I sped over to the nearest Goodwill to find a respectable dress and a jacket to wear. Of course, I kept my Converse on, but then we were able to head to the event. The event was held at Grace Church, one of the few remaining buildings in Charlotte's historically Black district, Brooklyn. As we walked up, Miss Ashford told me how she remembered attending the church as a little girl, remembered when it was full of people and music. She recalled several times the organ that sat in front of the large stained glass windows and how beautiful it sounded. Immediately when she came in, people crowded her. Her presence was clearly welcomed, respected, and radiant. Taking our seats in the crowd, Miss Ashford was sure to introduce me to everyone who looked in our direction. "She's an artist from Davidson College," she'd say, "the one who's doing a project on my family's history." That night, I met a larger community of collectors, curators, gallerists, and other Black artists. It was a new world for me, a world Miss Ashford had built a life in, and she eagerly welcomed me into it. As we left the venue and drove back down the street, Miss Ashford silently smiled. I assumed about the memories that she had built in her lifetime home of Charlotte. Her story is already intertwined and impacts the lives of so many other people. She and her family have a story to tell, one that Miss Nellie Ashford has helped translate into a work of art. Tonight, if you remember nothing else, remember their story. Thank you. And continuing with tonight's program, we have curated a short documentary with Hugh House, a creative agency in Charlotte, about this work of art. So please shift your attention to the screen and enjoy.
Look here, let me tell you something.
It was always doodling. My first pieces were sold. I just thought that I was doodling. I started doodling actually as a serious artist when my grandson and I would get on the floor and we would draw together. That grandson now is 31 years old, but he was my buddy, and we did everything together.
Come on now.
My art was discovered by me accidentally. Having major exhibits my first year of painting.
Her being commissioned is, I think, regardless of what the history is, it definitely is an honor, because there certainly are other Black artists out here who are not getting this type of recognition. With just how she started out, you just never could expect this type of acknowledgement.
There were people who lived and made it so that you could be who you are. That's why I don't put faces many times on some of the people, because it could be anybody. Throughout many countries, it has been shown that people will say, I remember when I was growing up and we used to do this or we used to do that. And it wasn't always people of color. There were people of many races who look at my work and they say, oh, I remember when. Oh, I remember when my grandmother talked about the 5 and 10 cent store. Oh, I remember somebody saying that we went to the creek to get water.
So it was time to graduate, and I had just enough credits to graduate, and so my advisor and I, at the time, Dr. Blue, had sat down and talked and said, well, you have your credits, but, why don't you just take this class? I think, you really like it. It's in collaboration with Davidson College. I had always heard the story and how our story connected to the Davidsons, but didn't know if there was any proof to it. Just kind of floated around the family. He was like, do you know Grace? And I'm like, no, I haven't met her. And then we met and then started talking, and then I started getting the information that I could from previous family members, if there was a connection, and if there was a connection, how. Just all I had was just that rumor about the Davidsons and how they connected to the Black Davidsons, who would be my ancestors, and then the Caldwells.
Keeping in mind how Grace's story and Ebony, my daughter's story, it gives me the captions for this story. I learned there are many things that I did not know before. I did not know that my great-grandfather was 9 years old on that plantation. I did not know the link between many different other last names are linked from Davidson. And the list goes on and on and on, what I did not know before I started this. I'm honored in some ways. I'm confused in other ways. I am sometimes angered by that idea of knowing this in other ways. I have all kinds of emotions. I would like for people to know that once upon a time, on those wonderful soils that we know Davidson as being one of the elite universities around, or colleges around for people. I want you to know once upon a time, my people walked those soils. My people helped build some of those buildings on your campus. My people was much a part of that space that you're looking at now. Very much a part of it. And so we deserve to be known. We deserve to be heard. And my child should be able to say, I got a full scholarship to go here because my ancestors were here. And you are giving me this opportunity to attend without having to worry about, I can't find a job in my field. Or I can't go to college because I don't have the money. Make that opportunity. If I've shown you through my grades that I can do this, make it so I can go. And when I get there, don't make it so hard for me that I don't graduate because of the color of my skin. That's all I'm asking. The ancestors from that university who once had us enslaved, you owe us this. You owe us this. We're not asking for it, but you owe it to us. Because you got free work from us all those years. And now it's time for you to pay us. Where's my art going from here? I want to go everywhere. To the smallest of spaces, to the largest of spaces. I don't have a limit.
Thank you, Hugh House, for that wonderful documentary. And now we're going to transition to a forum with Miss Nellie Ashford and Miss Ebony Hill. So if y'all could please come to the stage. Pull out the questions because got quite a few. So y'all are in for a treat. So hopefully between Maurice and I are what we've said in the documentary. Y'all have been provided a little more context to what this project has been about, but now we're going to speak with Ms. Ashford and Ms. Hill and ask them a few more questions to get their perspectives of what has happened. So my first question for y'all is, what are y'all initial reactions to the video? And they're up.
I thought it was. I think the video when I first saw it was profound, emotional. I think it says just what it needs to be said. I think that we took the opportunity to say maybe what wasn't said from the start of the program of the project in 2017. I think it was well done. I think it is the beginning of conversations that need to be had.
Ms. Ashford?
Would it be okay if I just say amen to that?
Yes.
My reaction was equally as Ebony's reaction, because the music in my soul made it feel even more real. And having this opportunity to do my simple way of works has made it so I just felt so new inside. So in a few words, I felt good.
That's wonderful, that's wonderful. So why is this story important to share? Or why do y'all feel the story is important to share?
It's important to share because, like I said, it should be a stepping stone for, even if it's just Davidson, to open up conversations about not just the accountability of slavery, but maybe sitting down and having conversations about offering opportunities to those descendants of slaves.
It's called A Time to Heal. Ecclesiastes 3. It's a time to do all of that for everybody. And until we are able to sit as humans and expound on yesterday for everybody's tomorrow, I think everything that is being done will be lost unless we begin to verbalize and capitalize on what is and what is to be.
That was beautiful. I don't know about y'all, got a little chills. So now, Ms. Ebony, I'm gonna ask you a few questions. I understand that you wanted to give acknowledgement to your great aunt Hildredge.
Yes, I do, because in the documentary I said that it was a rumor, but it was really only a rumor because I didn't pick up the compilation of the family history that my great aunt Hildred Roach Stafford started and compiled in 1989. And it was actually the foundation for making the connection between the descendants and the slaveholders, the Davidsons and the Caldwells.
And as the documentary stated, that you attended a joint course between Johnson C. Smith University and Davidson College. Take us back to your mind as a student. Could you describe the research process and how it affected you?
It was chaotic because literally I took this class to have a cushion. You know, I had been there a little long, so they wanted to make sure that I was leaving. So it was chaotic because
I understand that.
because we only had a short period of time. But from the time I met Grace, it was like I was on a mission. I was tunnel vision with the research and reading over what my great aunt had compiled and try to make the connection with the history that Grace already knew, because ours is just documented from oral history from my great grandmother Pearl Caldwell Roach. So it was chaotic, but it was a pleasure to work with her. I stand firm on that. She was very mature. We had outside influences, because it is a sensitive matter. But it was a pleasure, and I was excited, and it was tiring, and Dr. E, he required a lot, it wasn't just like, oh, we read this and this, and she has this, from her family. He really made it necessary that we have documentation that there was a connection.
Well, I'm glad he did. I've also had a class with him, so I firsthand experience understand what she's talking about. So now that you've had time to sit with the story, how has your relationship changed with it over the years?
Because I was so focused on, the story for me was like identity, because so many Black families don't have, they don't have a map to go and even begin. They don't have a foundation like I had. But afterwards, after, the smoke cleared and I graduated, and then we went through a time in this country of what the racial climate has become now. Mm-hmm. I was angry. I was, didn't really know how to articulate it. Not so much as Grace, because nobody in this room has owned slaves, and nobody in this room has been a slave, but we all need to acknowledge that there's a residue that has been left from slavery that has to be dealt with, because slavery has been the catalyst for inequality that still exists today. And so I went through different emotions and always hoped that I would get the opportunity to express what I didn't get to express at the beginning of the project in 2017.
And could you talk about how you would like the story to live on?
Yes, so my children are here, my grandchildren are here, and so I want them to pick up the baton because it's already set in stone. We've been brought together through art, and so my mom has made it that it's permanent, but I need them to pick up the torch, to breathe life in it, to continue to breathe life in it, and encourage other families to seek their roots and see what their connections are, find out how we really are connected.
It feels like a never-ending process in terms of it is difficult work to do that. So having people to continue that is important. And I hope that this program will spark some underclassmen or someone else who would continue to do this type of work as well. So some questions for Miss Nellie Ashford about your artwork, your piece, The Deed of Transformation. So being a folk artist, most of what you've learned has been self-taught. But knowing you personally, I understand that education plays a personal role in your life, or an important role in your life. And I'm curious about how your experience with education has shaped your practice as an artist.
How my education has shaped my experience. Education was an important thing in our house. Although the people who raised me, my dad only had a first grade education, my mom third. But they always say, go to school. And going to school for me was a happy time, because growing up with my old parents, I was an only child in that house. So going to school meant that I had friends, I had connection with people who came from elsewhere, people who had siblings, and I didn't have to just play with the cats and the chickens. I was able to actually talk to people who talked back. So education, going to a 4-room school, had no toilet inside, no cafeteria, no running water. That was the way school was in that 4-room school. But in that school, we learned lots and lots of things, so much that we could achieve further in life, going from that 4-room school with 2 classes in each room meant that I went to a high school, which is no longer there. Going to high school made me feel big inside. Had toilets inside, running water inside, and more people. And they had a band. They had a glee club. They had all sorts of things that I had not experienced in that four-room school. From there, I went to a junior college in Mecklenburg County. And from the junior college, I went to North Carolina Central. And from North Carolina Central, I went to Shaw University. So school, I love school. Anybody want me to come to school with them today? I do. I love school. And I wasn't an achiever in math. I like math, but I was not an achiever in math. But I would sit and work with it until I got everything done because I love school. And that's one of the reasons that doing this piece was so important to me, because it was doing it about a school that I never knew about. And doing that piece meant I was able to grasp things that I had no knowledge about in the beginning that I now know. And during that piece, I've had to do lots and lots of research. Wow. And walking and plundering and pondering over what to do this piece. So school, education, anything to do with reading, writing, and arithmetic for me now is math and genetics and kinesiology and yada, yada, yada. So, but anything to do with learning is important. And it's called teach them, teach them, teach them. So that's how that piece just kind of became a rhythm inside of me day after day until I got it finished. That help?
Yes. So to go on about the piece, can you tell us a little bit about the process of making it?
You don't want to know that.
I kind of do.
Wow. It's going to Lowe's, getting a board. It's going to a friend, asking him to make a stretcher for me. You ask. It's getting canvas and using gesso to put it on the canvas, raw canvas, with your hand. It's all of the above with nails, and because my hands are too weak to use the staple gun, and waiting for it to dry, touching it is not dry. Getting up at 2 in the morning because it looks like it's gonna rain and gotta get it inside because I left it out there to dry. You ask. And then getting final to the point to where I'm going to put something on there. I had kind of done my little, as you call it, sketch some days ago. And then I proceeded to use, I think it was modeling paste, and leaving that to dry for at least 3 days, because when you touch it, it would go down back to the board. Getting sand, putting it at the bottom.
Told y'all.
Getting wood filings, eventually finding some pictures and asking people, are these the right ones? And this person kind of looked like what you say they may have looked like. Then getting fabric, finding the right fibers that would look somewhat like that time. I actually had to live during slavery. I had to feel like I was part of slavery. I had to walk those grounds and feel like I had just come from the field working. I had to just look at the writings that were done, that my Aunt Hildred had done, calling her back and forward over and over again. Is this the right Robert? Is this the right William? Going to other family members, asking them, does it look like them a little bit? They say, yeah. Are you trying to make me feel good inside? No, it really looked like them. So all of those processes that I used kind of made me feel like I'm getting somewhere. and feeling like that I'm walking the grounds right around where those people lived and walked and did whatever they did day after day.
So it was a fully immersive experience. So when y'all see this piece, I hope y'all realize the amount of work that goes into it. Sometimes I feel like with artists, you just see the final piece and you don't really get to see or understand the process behind it. But artists put a lot of work into what they do, between the research and the talking to other people and the actual physical process of making it as well.
One other point, I'm a person of color. I love colors, reds, whites, yellows, blues. In that piece, I had to drop down to the blacks, the grays, and the browns. No reds, no blues, other than the sky. And so it made me sometimes kind of feel melancholy because of not being able to just put the real me on there. I'm doing what may have been, so that is another emotional feeling. Mm-hmm. I cried every now and then because I was tired.
So could you tell us a little about the title, The Deed of Transformation?
Deed of Transformation. With the help from a good friend who I call my son, we came up with that name because transforming from one to the other, the deed being land, because my great-great-grandfather purchased land from his brother's enslaved person to buy 150 acres in Shuffletown. Mm-hmm. And that deed, that actual real deed being handed from one person to the next, that's one. The other deed is the deed of people, the land from one side of the world for me, which is the other side of the river where the Anglo-Saxon Caldwells live, to the other side over here where the African-American folks live. So the deed of transformation, forming yourself from one place to the next, that's how we came up with that name. Right, Michael? Okay.
At the end of the documentary, Ms. Ashford, you started to mention what you imagine as Davidson's institutional responsibility. How do you believe the institution should be held accountable?
All I am saying in a few words is allow my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, their children, and years to come to go to school and not have a debt that they owe, not to give them something that will not be enough to make a success in their life. Their children go to school and don't have a bill. I want my children to come out and not have a bill. I want my children to be able to walk across that stage and go into the next part of their life, not owing a bill that will be so difficult to pay because they don't have the best job in the beginning anyway. All I'm asking is that you acknowledge those bricks that were made by some of my ancestors to be realized how important they were and are, because those buildings are still standing. If you don't believe it, when you walk outside, look for some of those old buildings. They have them marked. Just make it so that my children can go and have the same experience on this soil that your children have had. We're not asking for a house or a car. We're not asking for your bank account. All we're asking is for good
opportunity.
Absolutely. That's all. Nothing more than give me an opportunity to walk out these doors and hold my chest high and be able to go into life not owing a bill that's gonna be on my back for $90,000 or more. Just asking that you make it equal so my children won't have to worry about going to school today and going to school tomorrow. That's all we're asking for. And if you don't see that, then it's like Macbeth. Tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in the petty pace from day to day, and all of yesteryears has lost its syllable in recorded time. And all of this is signifying nothing if you can't see that. Is that right?
I can't read signals. But I think we're going to reveal the piece. No, excuse me. Okay, I have one last question for you. I know.
I'm doing the best I can.
You are doing amazing. I don't know, can y'all, yeah, thank you. How does this art piece stand out to you amongst the other pieces that you've created?
How does this art piece stand out? First of all, it has history that I knew nothing about. It has real history that is very meaningful that I knew nothing about in many ways. And because I was given the honor by some humble people here, some of your professors and your students, it means a lot that you chose me out of all of the wonderful artists in Charlotte and the surrounding area, and you chose little old me to do it. It means a lot. It makes me feel good inside. Thank you.
And now we will reveal the piece. Oh, I'm coming to help. I'm gonna stay on stage though. So thank you all for sharing and answering these questions. I know I had a lot for y'all, but I think y'all answered them beautifully, and I hope you all enjoyed listening to their responses. While these conversations are difficult to have, I think they're critical, and they're happening across the entire nation. Just this morning, I read a New York Times article about Harvard University having just announced their commitment of $100 million towards grappling with their institution's complicity with slavery. Recently, Davidson College received a gift of $25 million from the Duke Endowment Fund. Davidson is not new to receiving large donations such as this. I would argue that this institution, Davidson College, should join Harvard and several other institutions by allocating funds directly towards its complicity with slavery.
All right, and with that, can we give one more round of applause? Thank you so much for your time this evening, and everyone is free to leave or fellowship. Thank you.